Good evening, good morning, wherever you may be. My name is Darren Pope, and we are here today, just to be non-specific of what time it is for me, but we're here today, and we have Gavin on with us today. How you doing,
Hello.
Gavin?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you?
Good. It's going to slip up, so I'm going to go ahead and say it. It's nighttime for me. So there, it's my time. For our people in Australia, good morning.
Yeah,
Actually, is it good afternoon already? I think it might be almost good afternoon. But
might
anyway,
be. I don't think so. I think it's early morning.
that math is tough for
Yes.
me. So anyway, what we're here to talk about today is the Jenkins plugin site. Now, Gavin is a recent addition to the Jenkins governance board, but then he's also the maintainer. Are you the maintainer or one of the maintainers of the plugin site?
I've been the longest maintainer. There's
Longest
uh
maintainer.
there's been a few different people over the years. So
Okay. Now, here's the thing about Gavin, in case you didn't see the episode that we did with him and Marky a few weeks ago. Actually, I think that was back in December now. Gavin doesn't do anything with Jenkins.
very little. Yeah.
Very little. He focuses on the plugin site and other things around that. So, why are we here today? Well, it's actually fairly simple. The plugin site. Okay, let me tell you what I did. Gavin and I didn't talk about this part. I went back in the Wayback Machine to try to find old
God.
screenshots. But guess what? It didn't actually take the screenshots. It's just the link. So then it takes me to where I'm at today, which I
The
was bummed.
I can actually go into that a little bit right now. It'll look exactly the same as the plugin site has since the beginning. So anything I've done since then has not changed the initial view. We've made some tweaks
Oh,
here and there, but the plugin site was running. It just took like 3 minutes every time you tried to look at a plugin. It was really slow. Google results were slipping. It used to be so no one ever used it. It was linked everywhere, but nobody ever used it. So what happened is I came along one day and I said, I would really like to make the plugin site a static site because static sites are really fast, really easy. They're just a bunch of HTML files. If we, for some reason, all of our infrastructure goes down, static sites still keep running. So we took the same layout, the same UI, but we completely rewrote the behind the scenes of it. And now it's very fast. Google's very happy with it. It indexes, it comes up in results, that kind of thing.
okay. We'll get to the dirty underbelly of that because I want to hear the old and the
Yeah.
details of the new. But let's talk about a couple of things first. What the plugin site is. So
Yeah.
what is it for today? You've sort of alluded to it. It's obviously tells people about Jenkins plugins, but there's obviously more to it than that.
There actually isn't a whole lot more to it. It does
Okay.
its job. It does the unit velocity is doing its job and doing its job really well. So the core functionality of it is to list the plugins and associate data with the plugins. So on a given plugin, it might show how many installs there are, or if there's any open issues or any security issues. But it's all about trying to display information about a plugin.
Okay. Now let's talk about what the plugin site is not.
Yeah, it's not the what's called the update center. So in Jenkins, when you go to your plugin manager, it has a list of all the plugins. We use the same data, but that's not have anything to do with that. One day those two might merge, but for now, the plugin site is a web site, while the update center is, the back end that powers these. Well, it's update center is both. No, let's try that again. The update manager is in Jenkins, while the update center powers both the plugin site and the update manager.
It's
So
very simple.
confusing. Yeah, yeah,
Well, so we've got this. This is the update center.
yeah,
And then up here, we've got the update manager and the plugin site,
yeah.
right? Okay.
And various pieces of information feed into the update center, update center. And so like data flows all around the place. So the plugin site is just one UI of that data that also pulls in some data from other sources. But it's just a different focus. It's not about
Right.
installing the plugins, it's about finding the plugins
Right.
and knowing about them.
So let's dig into this a little bit. What's under the hood? So let's talk about what it used to be, and hopefully that's the last time it's ever mentioned anywhere.
Yeah.
Uh,
So Yeah, so when I came onto the project, it was running a really old version of React and a piece of software called Next.js. And Next.js is a lovely piece of software. It'll let you take uh, React code and render it in the backend so that any single browser that hits it can still see it. Unfortunately, because of the way the data was being fetched, it had a very slow startup time. So it fetched some data from this plugin site API that we had, some from the update center, some from other things, and it do that every time the page loaded. And that meant that we had to dedicate CPU time, like server, like infrastructure CPU time, to render this page each and every time. What we changed it to was a technology called Gatsby, which essentially is server-sided React. So the same UI that we had before will still work, but it renders individual HTML pages for each of the sites. So the main site is one HTML page, the search page is another HTML page, and then each individual plugin site is their own HTML page. This means that when you land on it, you'll get the same content no matter how many times you refresh. There's no backend server. We can distribute it wherever we need to distribute it. It's just a bunch of files. It became a lot faster. The downside is that the updates don't only happen once every 3 hours. So we're rebuilding the site every 3 hours and re-uploading it. It's a minor trade-off because plugins don't update that often. You might get a typo or something changed in a README file, or you might get a new release. But within 3 hours, it's your update center in Jenkins doesn't even update that fast. So it's
Right.
within tolerance.
I was wondering what that cadence was.
Yeah.
And I've pulled up the plugin site here.
Yeah.
Let's just take a quick look at it. Now we can see it's plugins.jenkins.io. Now, since you're using Gatsby, Gatsby is an SSR, right? No, not SSR.
No,
It's
it is server-side render.
Is it server-side render?
Yeah.
Or is it static site generator, SSG?
Both of those things, yep.
How are you doing it both? Since you're doing both every 3 hours and?
So React, you server-side render React,
Yes.
which is what we're doing. But Gatsby is pulling the data to feed into React, and so Gatsby is a static site generator that uses SSR.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if there's not enough acronyms there for you yet,
Oh, we got
just
lots
wait.
more.
We have more to get to. I'm sure we do. This would not be a stream about Jenkins unless there was more acronyms to use.
Or tech in general, yeah.
Yes, and by the way, for everybody that's here live with us, yes, we are live. And if you've got any questions or comments, you can drop them over in the chat, just over to the other side of the browser. So this is, other than which manga character was this supposed to be? Do you remember?
I think Voltron,
Was it Voltron? Okay.
because it has all kinds of pieces that assemble together like that. But I don't know. This predates me by a long shot.
Yeah. So we're definitely not going to talk about that. So let's talk about these different sections. So new plugins, recently updated, and trending.
Yes.
And so I'm guessing right here on the browse categories, that's about as static gets.
Yes. So one of the very first releases of the plugin site before I took over added the idea to have labels and categories, and I think even one more categorization. So they've been there for a while. Some of that data is actually used in the Jenkins manager. Some of it's not. The two have to eventually be reconciled a little bit more. And I think there is hopeful plans for adding more categories so we can, drill down a little bit easier. Mm-hmm. But the idea is category is a list of plugins that is curated, while labels are essentially less curated. They're they can be on any random plugin.
Okay. And then, go ahead and finish.
Category, you can only be in one category, I believe, but you can have many labels.
Okay. So how does the data feed these three sections here? Is that separate RSS feeds, or what? How is it being chewed in?
Yeah, so this is one of those things that comes in from different source of information. Jenkins actually has a bunch of reporting, like very, very high level reporting. So from the server side of the tool that you download your plugin from, we actually know how many people have downloaded a plugin. We also know to some degree how many people have installed it, what version you've installed it. I mean, it's very anonymized, but we do have that data. That data does get published to a JSON file, and I believe it's on the reports Jenkins site. So it can be consumed by anyone. Most of Jenkins is public and consumable by anyone. So one process is called the plugin site API that sits there and grabs that every once in a while. And I don't actually know offhand how often it grabs that. I think it's once a day type thing, because that doesn't change very often.
Right.
That will keep track of new plugins. I think it's just a trending plugin, so it knows how many installs it has. Update Center, which powers when a plugin author uploads a new plugin, will go to Update Center. We fetch the data from Update Center and say, hey, when was the most recent plugins? What are the new plugins? So their first release as opposed to recently updated is the most recent release. Yeah, and we try to render a list here. We've talked a couple times about different ways of rendering the data, and everyone's willing. Sorry, we're totally open to new ideas, but this is what we have for now.
Yeah. And one of the things too that you can see is if you scroll all the way to the bottom, this bottom left-hand side, it's got a Creative Commons 4.0 license, but then right below that, these two sections here, I'll go to the very bottom. So is this the last render time?
Yes.
Okay.
So GMT would have been what, an hour ago?
3:50. Yeah.
So it was hour 0, so minute 3.
Oh, minute 3. Right. Sorry, my bad.
So I think that's about an hour, 2 hours ago.
Okay. So that's the last time it was rendered. And then these two, you may say, well, what's this about? Well, if you look at the hover, and I'll just go there.
Yeah.
There is the pull request, or the merge request, the pull request.
Yes.
I've been working with multiple SCMs today, so my phrasing is all messed up. So Gatsby got bumped.
Yep. But this was a bunch of minor patches, mostly styling, to increase. I don't remember exactly specifically on this, but it looks like it's styling on the documentation page itself to just add a bit of padding. And then we have some basic tests. We definitely need to make more, but we have some. So that's what this was updating a bit.
So that was the UI. And then let's take a look at the API side. Whoops.
Yes.
That did not work. Hang on a second.
So while you're doing that, we do actually have, so while I said most of the data is pulled from the Update Center, there's a bit of live data that is pulled from the plugin site API.
Oh, really? Okay.
This is a service that we're running in the infrastructure. It doesn't need to be running for this site to function, but it does need to be running for, let's say, the search, because search is technically live.
Right.
There's also, if you click on an individual plugin, you'll see the issues tab is done by the plugin site API, so it's not pre-rendered, because GitHub would hate us and Jira would hate us if we rendered this constantly. Right. And the releases data is partially rendered from it. So we pull this initial list from Update Center, and then we go off and try to find it. Right now, we can only support GitHub releases, but eventually we're going to support changelog files and other ways to get release notes in here. So this is done live. So the idea is that we have the minimum data we need to render the page from the 3-hour render, and then some live data to help increase or help benefit the page.
Right.
So the plugin site API does that. It has a list of issues. It has an API for getting releases. It actually does the actual scraping of sites to get the documentation for the plugin. So we do have to pull some data that's not in Update Center.
Right. So going back to the API change you made earlier, it was just a couple of small cleanups.
Yes.
Nothing huge.
This is probably like 6 months ago. It does not get changed very often.
Yeah, so this last PR came in July 30th of 2020.
Yeah. So
July 30th of the year that we don't mention anymore.
Yeah. This specifically was changing it to use GitHub Apps, which gives us the ability to pull data, a lot more data. So we were able to scrape not just README files, but a few other files and the releases and issues.
Right. Okay. So I'm going to ignore those for just a second. Now, I ended up clicking on Datadog. I happened to notice today that Datadog had a new release.
Yep.
When I looked earlier today, you were talking about, I clicked over to releases, 280 was already there, but this was still showing 270. And this was because I caught that 3-hour window, I would assume.
Yeah, honestly, that shouldn't be the case. They should be both fed from the same data, but maybe, yes.
Okay.
Because releases pulls from one site part of Update Center, and that list on the side pulls from a different side of Update Center,
Yep.
and all of them run in a cron-like fashion. There is at least a little bit of gray areas where they could be desynced.
Right. But let me go, because this one is actually boring.
Yes.
I want to. Which one should we go to? What's a good example?
Configuration as code or GitHub are both really.
Okay. Let's see if this works the way I want it to. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's the cool docs. Now these docs you actually don't maintain. These are coming from
GitHub.
This.
Yes.
They're coming from GitHub. And there was a big push over the past
year.
18 months,
Yeah.
12, 18 months, to get this to be easy, right?
Yeah.
So this README that's here is feeding this.
Yeah. We had the wiki, which is what used to be where all the
Yes.
plugin sites were, the plugin data was stored, fell over hard. It did come back, but it did fall over really hard. So we decided to make it read-only. So no more changes from it. This had the side effect of meaning you couldn't update plugin documentation.
Right.
So a lot of us got together and updated. That's when I started to get involved. I think Oleg added GitHub support to where we were fetching this data, so we could pull in GitHub README files in here. And that's when I started to go, well, why don't we make this static so the plugin site is fast?
Right.
And then we made the wiki redirect all the content that was in the wiki to here. Yeah. So this file, I know for a fact configuration as code is the documentation is pulled from the GitHub. I believe the README file actually. Yeah,
Yes.
as you said. There are some plugins that are still using the wiki, which are really old ones. There are some others. There's actually 4 different ways for plugins to support documentation right now, and we're still trying to clean it up to be a little bit more centralized. But this one is fully in README. They also do the releases through GitHub releases. So as you saw, as we showed earlier, yeah. So we have this nice release notes posted here with all the different PRs that were merged into this release. But if you go to the actual plugin site and you look at the releases tab, you'll see the same UI that we had before, but it does pull in live those same notes.
Yeah, I don't know if you caught it, but when I first brought this page up, this wasn't here. It flew in.
Yeah.
So
And again,
I
this
saw
is just to make it so that GitHub doesn't get angry with us.
Right. Because there's no reason to load everything all the time.
Yeah. And we don't really care about release notes being searchable or Googleable.
Right.
No. Now, I know we're going to start. I know we're going to bring it up soon, but one of the things that is very hot topic right now is the next tab is issues, and this is only supporting Jira right now, which configuration of code sometimes they're moving away from. So a lot of plugins are moving away from having their issues in Jira. So right now, literally like this last week, we've been working, various departments, let's call them, have been working together to try to get it so we can start pulling in Jira issues, GitHub issues, and anything else we're going to eventually support. So this tab will actually be more useful as you see in the future.
Right. Now, I never see any issues here. Is it because I'm not logged into the Jira? Is there a tie between those two?
Configuration of code doesn't use Jira.
True.
So if you look at Git, I think you'll probably find some.
Here,
And they're one of the really big ones.
Let's go check it out real quick. So if we just take the main Git, right, or Git client. Okay.
Let's do the main Git. I think they use Git, not Jira.
Yeah, I don't.
No. Okay, so it's just broken. We broke it one day, but forgot about it.
Well, either you broke it or because it's rare that I've ever seen it, because even sometimes when I would see it, it would just sit there and spin.
Yeah. My guess is about a month ago, we moved Jira from being Jenkins hosted to Linux Foundation hosted, and I suspect something in there broke. So we'll have to go back and look into it.
Minor. No big deal.
Until the new support for both GitHub and Jira issues, it hasn't been a priority to fix because everything's all over the place.
And then, I'm not going to make you talk about that because you'd probably get in trouble. I don't want to get you in trouble. But it's interesting to hear that we've got that. So at least for Git as well, And of course, we've had Mark Wade on here a few times. This is the plugin that Mark maintains,
Yeah.
or one of
And
them.
a lot of the plugin authors really like Dependabot. It's a really, or not Dependabot, release drafter.
Release drafter, yeah.
So every time a PR is merged into a plugin, the release notes gets updated as a draft, and then when you're ready to go, you hit release, and then this will get incorporated.
Yeah.
I do know we've had a number of open issues for adding changelog files, so other files containing changelogs, so those will come, but we just haven't prioritized it yet.
Cool. Let's look at dependencies, just because we're here.
Mm-hmm.
So what's this? Because that loads really fast, so that tells me this is probably already baked.
Yeah. So this is coming directly from the plugin. So Update Center parses the actual plugin data, passes it to the plugin site, or we fetch it from Update Center. And so we know exactly both directions. We know which plugins depend on it and which plugins it depends on.
The dependent, right, which is this one, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the first half are things that it needs to be installed. And let's say you're doing a completely offline install, you could potentially go into each one of these and download them yourself. I would never recommend doing that, but you totally could. And then it would say optional ones to make it a better experience, or that it integrates with directly, but not required. And then the ones below that, the dependent plugins, are a list of all the plugins that depend on it.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, I'm a little surprised to see how many plugins require Git to be around. I guess for like changelog parsing and stuff like that.
I guess, but let's just keep it simple. So we'll pick GitHub here. GitHub has a dependency on the Git plugin. The Git plugin has a required dependency on all of these, and optionally this.
Yep.
And you were talking about labels earlier. The labels are shown over here.
Yep. So those are managed. Legacy labels are managed through Update Center. You submit a PR. It's not a great process. So we have made it so that you can actually label the GitHub repo itself, and it'll pull in here. We have I don't know of any offhand that do it, so I'm not sure I can find you a good. Oh, there's an example. Yeah, so they actually do that. So they have Git and SCM as labels on the far right. Yeah. And we have a list that we maps SCM to SCM connections.
To SCM connections.
And it's not going to be like an author can just put whatever they want in, but down the road maybe we will let that. But for now, we're going to stick with that.
Right. So I'm guessing the lower Git here maps to lower Git here.
I would suspect yes. I would suspect most likely we just don't have a map for it, so it just displays Git by itself.
So if Mark was to go in here and put in a rebar label, when we would come back over here, we wouldn't see anything there.
Not right away. It would. I honestly can't say offhand if GitHub labels are pulled in directly, or if they have to be in a list or not. I can't remember what we implemented.
Okay.
But in Update Center, there's a list of plugins that we allow, or labels that we allow. So worst case, you just add another list to that, and then anyone could add to it. And it makes it searchable because in GitHub, you can search by labels too.
Oh, that's true. So the one thing we really didn't do is go down this right-hand side.
Yes.
So if you've never caught this archives, you just think it might be, hey, that's a pretty picture, but in reality, it's real. That is where, whoops, what did I do?
No, that got changed like 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. That goes to the releases page.
Releases page, sure enough.
It's the same data that what you're thinking of. So it used to go to Update Center, which is just the raw links.
Yeah.
Now the archives go to the releases tab, which has the same data. So if you click on Git plugin 4.5.2,
the
one above it.
Do that. Oh, the one above it. The
actual title, yes.
Okay.
That will link you to the actual file that can be downloaded.
And off it goes.
Yep.
So that's where it would come from a mirror, obviously.
Yep.
And so again, this isn't your part of this general, but updates is basically a redirector that goes to another site that ends up giving you a mirror. So it's three hops when it's all said and done, typically, right?
Typically,
because updates to Git, G-E-T, and then Git gives you a mirror of some sort. The other thing that I noticed here too is that it looks like you've recently put in the Jenkins Plugin CLI.
Yes. So we're trying to encourage the use of this. There has been various ways to install plugins not using the UI in the past. We wanted to centralize. So one of the things was we wanted to link to the new Jenkins Plugin CLI, which is another open source project.
Yeah, and if you're unaware of what this is, let me go ahead and pull this up. I did a video on doing an installation of LTS with it was Ansible, and inside of that I was doing JCask, and I was using the plugin installation manager tool to do that.
Yeah.
So
this started off as a summer code project. A student started working on it a couple of years ago, and as you can see, there's a lot of contributors on it now.
Yeah.
But it essentially takes the same logic that the update center in Jenkins itself has, applies it to a CLI, which can then be used. You can just install it. If you have like an offline install and you want to copy it, it'll find dependent plugins. It'll find more recent plugins. I use it in my personal Docker build. So every time I build a version of Jenkins, it can do that, and then I just bake all the plugins into my image directly.
Yeah. I think the one thing that needs to be called out is Jenkins-plugin-CLI isn't a real thing, right?
I don't know. It is in the Docker image.
Oh, it is in the Docker image.
Yes.
Yeah. If you download, so if you were to go to the releases, then it's just a jar file.
Yeah.
That's all.
So that is something you might want to change to be a little bit more generic. In the actual Docker image, there's a wrapper that's called Jenkins Plugin Cli.
Okay. That's basically doing the java-jar.
Yep.
Ugly jar name.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. And again, we won't dig into that tonight, but I noticed that yesterday or today and saw that how new is this? Is this still in the last month? Okay. It just didn't jump out to me until the other day. So again, this gets baked in. So this is a hard bake, right?
Yep.
And the SHAs are a hard bake, and then this dependency, the Dependabot stuff the release drafter stuff is being pulled in.
Well, anything in GitHub releases will get pulled in. So we match the version from the actual released version to the GitHub release, and then merge the release notes.
Okay.
So it doesn't have to be released. It can be anything you want in there. And again, we're going to hopefully support more features, because some authors rather do a Markdown file. Someone might want to have. Actually, Markdown's the only one I know offhand.
Yeah.
But
that'd be the simplest. Now, when you do this scrape back over to GitHub for the release drafter, do you fill in all of the ones that are on this page today?
Yes.
Okay. So it's going to keep scraping and scraping and scraping until it's done. I imagine that falls.
I don't know how many. It might only be like 100 or 20. It got to the point where I was like, no one's going to scroll down this far, and I'm not going to check. Okay. So the average plugin doesn't even have a lot. The Git is extreme, has a lot. It's been around a while. It's maintained a lot. The average plugin probably has 20 or 50 releases, and you don't notice.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's no big deal. Oh, also, we skipped one little thing up here. In gray is the plugin ID.
Yeah.
A lot of people, if you're ever looking for what I call the slug, if you're used to URLs in a browser, I consider this the slug. That makes it easier sometimes to find. And no hint necessary, this is actually the name of the HPI or JPI file.
Yep.
100% of the time? I believe it is.
Yeah, well, it will be the name of the plugin.
Yeah.
I don't believe there's any plugins that have the word plugin in their name, but some of the repos and some of the title might say plugin, but the plug does not.
Right.
But I'm not 100% guaranteed on that. It will be whatever the data has. So
whatever it has. More than likely, that's what it's going to be. Okay,
which is exactly what my next project for this site is trying to address. So over the last, since I added the issue tab, over the last 6 months, we've been trying to clean up data slightly. We had an issue where Jira components, which is what it maps to, were not named exactly the same as plugins. There was, they were created at one point where they're done by hand. So someone typoed or someone added the word dash plugin on the end and didn't on the plugin name, that kind of thing. So a bunch of us got together and we cleaned up as many as we could. Not every plugin has a Jira component. And we've actually decided, through indecision, we decided on the mailing list that some people really love the GitHub issue tracker. Some people really love Jira issue tracker. Neither side really wanted to give up that freedom. So our plan is to support both. And that is a project that I know Daniel, Beck, and I and a few other people are working on to make sure that the update center has that information so that, at least a short term, the plugin site will have a very accurate link of where to report issues with plugins. Because right now, a lot of people have trouble. They might create an issue in Jira and nobody will ever see it, or they might create an issue in GitHub and nobody wants to look there, or they might even make in the wrong repo. Like we've had some people write plugin issues in the plugin site repo themselves, and unfortunately, the authors don't look at that one. So what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that it's very clear that not only the issue tab gets updated to point to the right spot, but the sidebar will actually link to the right spot. So right now it just says GitHub, but we want to also make sure it adds, I don't know exactly what we're going to put here yet, but it would be like Jira or issues. Some sites will have multiples. So configuration of code has Jira from the past and GitHub now. So we might have to find a way to render that both. We might not. We might decide that the old data is not used rendering. We'll just put the new data in.
Right.
I know, but that is one project we're working on right now, and we're trying to get that data in there. We haven't quite figured out all the details yet. I know I would like to eventually also get to the point where, just for the fun of it, is that you can click on a maintainer name and see all the other plugins they maintained.
Oh yeah.
It doesn't do that right now. We have the data. It's super easy to do. We just haven't done it. If anyone wants to do some work on the web experience, and you can come by the Docs Gitter channel, which is where we hang out for the plugin site, and I will help you walk through it. We have open issues, that kind of thing, but that would be a nice, easy, simple one that anyone who wanted to come and help get started with could do. And then the last one, which is just like a really far out there reach stretch goal, is I want to see if I can improve the search engine a lot more. So while we get great searching results from Google, and we actually get reports every month about it, I want to see if we can replace this, not just simple straight up search, but the whole categories, the user things, the sorting. I want to make this a little bit more standard. There's a couple of products out there that can make the searching a little bit easier to use. Maybe even change how this rendering works. Because right now, if you type in, I've said in the past, I work at DigitalOcean, so I tried to type in DigitalOcean one day and I put a space in it, and that brings me to Blue Ocean, which is not what I asked for.
But if I was to do Digital-Ocean,
I think it's just no hyphen. I think it's just one word.
Just one word.
Right. So there are various search tools out there that specialize in text-based searching, so they might be worth looking into and integrating with. So that is definitely something I want to look into as well, because it's really hard to search for plugins right now.
Yeah. So what is the search engine under this hood? Do you remember?
Not really anything. It's like it looks in a database and says, does it match? No. Does it partial match?
Okay.
Yes. Okay, that's good enough.
So there isn't anything like Elasticsearch or something under the hood that's indexed everything, and
we do. So the plugin site API does have Elasticsearch running. It predates me by a long time, and it's a really, really old version, so I'm afraid to touch it. But it's all embedded and it works. It's just I think we can do better. So it is a lofty stretch goal for me.
Okay. Let's see here. And you sort of dug into a few of the things that, where is it heading? And obviously we've talked about a few of them. I do want to finish up a couple of things here that we sort of jumped around.
Yeah.
Obviously version number, this is going to be the most recent version number.
Yep.
Plus or minus 3 hours.
Yep. So funny enough, with version numbers, it's very hard to determine what the latest is. So it's actually technically the most recent and not necessarily the latest.
Oh, right. Yes, I noticed that because if somebody burns a build number, so let's say the next build number, let's say the current build number is 1.1. The next build number you would expect to be 1.2 if you're following a normal numbering scheme. But let's say you fat fingered it, instead of it being 1.2, you did 1.22.
Yeah.
just because you double
It
clicked
happens.
on the 2. Yeah, it happens. So in that case, it'd be like, wait, what? That's not what we were expecting. So.
Yeah. Or even back fixes. So someone might fix. We had when I was working with Blue Ocean for a bit, we had to go back and do patches to older releases, especially when we had things that weren't ready to go. So we might have 1.1.1, but that would be the newer release than 1.2.
Correct.
But 1.2 might have couple features that we were fixing or something, So it depends on the author and their versioning scheme. So this is always the most recent release, not necessarily the highest release number.
And what we're saying most recent is probably what's going to be right here at the top of releases.
And most of the plugin authors will do it incrementally, so it's probably going to be most recent. It's just not guaranteed.
Right. So I imagine the released and requires all that just comes along when you extract this data.
Yep. So it all comes from the actual metadata of the plugin, so it's all up to date.
What about the install number? This seems magical.
It is crazy how awesome and scary where that data comes from. But essentially, every time, I actually don't know fully how it works. I believe every time you ask the Update Center for a list of plugins for your version of Jenkins, it records that version of Jenkins is still in use. It also notices when you do and download versions of plugins, it will grab and say, yes, that has been downloaded. And I think there's an opt-in in Jenkins to say, hey, report which version of plugins I use, which will indicate this installs. So if, that means there's 260,000 installs of Jenkins out there reporting that are using GitHub or Git plugin. It's actually, the number is way, way, way higher, but there's that many that are reporting it.
Correct.
And then we scrape that we have Elasticsearch, so we have the data. It does get merged in, so we do have a history of that. But the interesting thing is with scales and graphs, once you get to a certain number, that graph looks pretty flat.
Right.
So.
Yeah, that's okay. Links we've already sort of talked around.
Yeah.
I want to throw my 2 cents in for the place to where they want to open an issue.
Yeah.
Let's just have a link that says open a new issue.
Yeah.
Or search existing issues, or whatever you might want to call it. That would be a parallel of issues here, obviously.
Yeah.
But and then if it's that legacy stuff, like the old configuration as code stuff, it's like it would be just another link that's read-only legacy prior to whatever the new one is.
Totally. And Daniel's created a really great metadata to track the information, so we'll be able to know which one's the current issue tracker and which one's the legacy one. So we're very clear. We can make that. I do a lot of support on IRC and stuff like that. I want to make it very clear how and why you can report issues and that kind of thing. So that's high priority for me.
I am not a UX person.
Yeah, me neither.
There's this big tables to divs thing going on. Obviously, if you've been following the Jenkins community, you know a lot about it. I'm barely getting to tables. What is this div thing you're talking about? But see, React. Now, here's an interesting thing. Help us improve the page. This is to where people could actually...
So that'll bring you to wherever the documentation
to the Git plugin,
is.
Right, the documentation. But then we get here to previous security warnings. This is reasonably new as well, right?
It's always been there, but it got moved around.
Oh, okay. Well, that's the reason why it's new to me, because I never saw it over on this side. So it wasn't always on the right.
It used to be a pop-up that you had to click. There was a little, what is it, the warning, the triangle with the exclamation point. You had to click that, and then you got this information. And nobody knew it was there, so we moved it.
Okay.
The only downside to I see this right now is it's hard to tell whether or not the security warning is still in effect. So these are technically all ones that have affected previous versions, and there should be a bar across the top for things that affect the current version. Right. But that data is somewhat hand managed. Like it's the security team manages it. It's in computer readable files, but whether or not it's been fixed is kind of a little bit gray. So sometimes you might see something that says it was found in version 3.3.1 and earlier, but doesn't necessarily mean it was fixed in 3.3.2. We just know that it's in that one and earlier. So this is something we could definitely get some UX help, and someone could, figure out how to present this data better so that people aren't as scared about installing plugins that have been fixed. I mean, to me, any plugin that's been fixed is going to know more about security than they did before they had the issue.
Right.
So it's a good thing. I wouldn't say it's a good thing to have security issues, but it's a learning experience, and you're less likely to repeat it again.
You would hope so.
Yeah. I have faith in humanity, so.
I have faith in Mark, because this is the GitHub.
Yes.
We'll see everybody else, including myself.
Yeah.
What else can we talk about on the plugin site? We've talked about all the. I'm not going to scroll to the bottom because that one's long. Let's go here. We've talked about pulling in the README if people have done the right things in their repository. This is a long one too. Here.
Yep.
Let's go back to Datadog because it was short.
How about I've got one for you. It's a very awesome one. You should look down for Markdown.
Look for Markdown?
Yeah.
Okay.
The first one. You'll never guess who created this plugin.
You did.
It's one of my little bit of Java work. At one point in RSC, someone's like, "Can we get Markdown in your description of your job?" And I'm like, "I think we can." And like 2 hours later, this is one of those times where it turns out to be really easy. Yeah,
initial release.
It's very exciting, right? It has one release. It hasn't changed since then.
Do we dare look at the code?
Sure. It's like it uses a third-party library to scrape.
Oh, okay.
It's not exciting, but it is functional, right? It's again the README file here totally links up.
Are you using Release Drafter, I guess, as well?
I am using Release Drafter.
Or you did, since there's only been one.
Yes.
And just out of grins, so your day-to-day job, you are not a Java developer.
No, I'm a Ruby and Golang developer. In fact, I don't even do JavaScript anymore.
Does that make you happy?
Okay. It makes me a little sad. I like JavaScript a lot.
Okay.
Which is why the plugin site's all in JavaScript. I like it a lot.
So yeah, you're using FlexMark. Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, it's like 10 lines of code. It doesn't do very much, but it means that you can pull in your GitHub descriptions right out of the box and it works. So it was a nice, useful little tool. But again, it only has 30 installs, right? So it's one thing is we want to look at making discoverability a bit better. So that means searching needs to be better. Actually, it has 39 installs. That's
it's gone up.
Gone up drastically.
No dependencies?
No, there is no dependencies.
You're the man.
Plugin. Yeah.
You're the man. This is a good thing.
It's actually only because it requires a recent version of Jenkins. So old plugins, you'll see this. I don't know if we can think of one. You think of anything that's older. Actually, I can tell you one. There's an old one that I became a maintainer for called HTML5 notifier. So just look for HTML5.
This one.
First one, yes. So this one requires a really old version, 1.4.55. It hasn't been updated in a long time.
6 years.
And you look at dependencies here, you'll see implicit dependencies. Implied, sorry. Over the years, Jenkins has split off some functionality that was core into implicit plugins. So this is what this is. Because it's compiled with an old version of Jenkins and depends on it, it has to have these plugins installed to work. Now, this code doesn't use any of those plugins. So you'll see some of the really older plugins have an implied, and there's actually a pop-up. If you click, "What is this?" and fingers crossed, it works. It'll tell you what it means. It's essentially, it's plugins that should be there. Probably don't need it, but we couldn't guarantee it because this is such an old plugin.
Right. So this was the case of this. These used to be part of core. Right.
They used to be. I don't remember if they had to be core or that they were installed always in core.
Okay.
So like the LDAP plugin has been a plugin for as long as I've been using Jenkins, but it may have always been installed.
Right. Whereas looking at maybe, well, I don't know, this one's going away or has gone away, right? I've lost track.
Matrix plugin is no longer installed by default.
Yeah, Matrix.
I don't think the Windows agent is installed by default anymore. So.
Yeah. Good catch.
So the other thing, the last thing on my list of things to cover was getting people involved, and it's
Yes.
something that open source communities in general have, and I would say the plugin site in general is no better at that. We are always looking for more people to help. We had a bunch of summer code students help out because they knew JavaScript a little bit better. But I'm always around in some form or another. So if anyone out there is seeing this and wants to get involved, you can get a hold of me on Twitter. I prefer Gitter because there's a lot of people there that can help. The docs channel in the Jenkins docs channel in Gitter is, very welcoming. Mark is our docs lead and great person to talk to. And there's a number of us there who can help with the actual day-to-day implementation. But we're always looking for help. Anything from we don't have the docs here. We might want to add the docs group in here.
It's not there.
Yeah, so that may be something we might have to do now. But we look for help from anything from you want to learn UX. Most of the developers in the Jenkins space are not UX developers. There is a UX special interest group, but the plugin site specifically would love any and all help with that. There it is.
Yeah, it had to be. You had to go over to SIGs.
Yeah.
So then,
I've been a little bit quiet in here, but there's conversations. It goes about the documentation. So there are a lot of help looking, or docs in general are always looking for help. So that could be Jenkins.io docs. That could be plugin docs. We have a tool that will list all the plugins that have not yet migrated to GitHub. There are, if you want to do JavaScript, we're always looking for more help with any feature. It can be a feature that we've come up with or a feature that you're interested in. We have Java backend, so there's room there. If you're interested in the plugin site, I am totally on board with helping wherever I can. Or if like I said, so JavaScript, Java, the Jenkins.io is in Ruby. So if you're not the strong Java developer, you don't want to work on the Jenkins core, we have lots of room there for non-Java developers.
Cool. So you think we covered it?
I don't have anything else.
Have we pulled back all the secrets, the hidden skeletons that are underneath the plugin site?
Probably not. There's lots. Like right now, there's some silly things like the trending list on the side of the front page is not very useful because it just lists all the plugins that every other plugin depends on. So like there's like the jQuery API. The checks API, the jQuery API. So those are one thing we're going to look into filtering out because they're not really trending per se. Right. They're more libraries than plugins.
Right. Every one of these is a library, I think. Yeah. And most of them are probably related back to, let's see.
Splitting off the applied ones.
Yeah. Well, no, this one, all of these, I can't remember TriLead, are all dependencies for, help me, warnings in G.
Probably, yes.
These are all warnings in G related.
TriLead has something to do with SSH. So there's a lot of plugins that need that, or maybe even just like encryption in general. I'm not entirely sure. So that probably sooner than later we'll filter those out of trending because they're not very useful that way. No one's going to install the jQuery API plugin by themselves.
Yeah, please don't, by the way, if you were thinking about it, because it's not going to do what you think it does.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so let me ask you this question.
Yeah.
Because since Mark isn't here and you're here.
Yeah.
If, for most people, if they have been around and have been writing plugins, if it ends in API, that is probably not a quote-unquote user-friendly plugin. An end-user-friendly plugin. That may not be true all the time, but is that...
None of them are designed for, as far as I understand, anything that ends in API, and we might even be able to filter that more specifically, are plugins that plugins are supposed to depend on. So like the jQuery API plugin is if your plugin uses jQuery, instead of you depending on it and you installing it, and then you making sure that your version doesn't conflict with another version, you depend on the jQuery API plugin, which will install jQuery. And then if two plugins use the same thing, they don't collide and stuff like that.
Right.
Some of the UI versions of those will probably go away because JavaScript build tools are getting a little bit more self-contained. So instead of having one centralized version, we can make them contained. So like warnings plugin could just distribute as much as they want in the warnings plugin. That's debate whether or not that'll happen, but it could happen. So you might see some of those go away. But things like the tri-lead one, which is, or I can't think of, there's a couple other Java ones that are, you know, you want to have a bunch of plugins use the same code. They might depend on this API plugin.
Right.
But either way, you would never, unless you're installing things offline in an environment, and even then use the plugin CLI, you'll never need to install these by hand.
Right. Is that it?
I think so.
Feeling pretty good about that?
I'm feeling pretty happy. I hope to, get some feedback. I don't know if there's any comments in YouTube you want to.
Don't see any right now.
Yeah.
But we'll see if anything pops in here real quick. Again, if you want to, what is your handle on Gitter?
It's Hawkeye. It's Hawkeye everywhere. So HALKUYE.
Yeah. So I'll go ahead and I'll drop that back up. There is Gavin's Twitter and everything ID.
Yep.
Do you want to explain why it's Hawkeye and not Hawkeye?
It's always a fun story, but as a kid, I was a very big fan of MASH, and I loved the Doctor in MASH. But it turns out I'm slightly dyslexic, or I am fully dyslexic, and I dealt with it. So to me, that's how you spell Hawkeye. It wasn't until many years later that I'm like, oh, that's not how you spell it. But the advantage is that nobody spells it that way, so I can use it everywhere.
Everywhere. That helps a lot. Yeah. So if you have questions about it, follow up with Gavin. Any final words? Do you feel?
We love help, So
come help.
Yeah. Even if you just like, hey, I have an idea that maybe this is better like this. Write it up as an issue, and we'll consider it, and maybe someone will implement it. There is one UX person on the plugin site team, but most of us are not. Like, I know HTML and CSS, but I don't know how to lay things out. So we're always looking for any and all feedback, even if it's just like, oh, I didn't know this was here in the corner. I just found it. Maybe we should move it.
Right. Or you're wanting to help other people. I don't know. You said there's a list of plugins still that haven't migrated to. Yeah.
Mark actually wrote a big blog post about it, but if you go, what is the URL? Jenkins Wiki Exporter.jenkins.io.
Oh, I remember that. Jenkins, is it -wiki exporter?
-wiki-exporter. So this is one of the projects I did a year ago, how I got more involved. And if you click on the progress button, it'll list all the plugins that have not yet migrated to GitHub. So sometimes it's just as easy as, hey, I want to export this plugin's data. It takes a while.
Oh, okay.
It's the new version.
I'll be patient.
The new version that'll come out hopefully this week will actually pull data from a different source, and that'll be faster. But it's currently querying all over the place to get the data. But it lists all the plugins that have currently not migrated, and any one of those plugin authors you can create a PR for. And we wrote a tool that helps you export from the old wiki into the new GitHub format. So even that, just a simple PR. I'm plugging it a couple months late, but Hacktoberfest is always a great time to do that. I got my new 2020 shirt today.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
I haven't received mine yet.
Yeah.
It's Hacktoberfest year round. There's no if you've got a spare 30 minutes,
yeah,
and you can, you probably couldn't get this done in 30 minutes, but
Mark and I have done demos. The wiki exporting is really quick. In the front page, you enter the plugin name, you get a zip file, and then you create a PR with that zip file. So yeah, you could do it then.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. So there's the wiki exporter, and that's primarily, now it looks like this is sort of weird. So, it says okay. Oh, so what we're looking for is something that's PR or
to do, pretty much.
To do.
PR means that it hasn't been merged yet, but there's a PR pending.
Okay. So here's the number. Here's the real breakdown. So there's 1,100. There's only 600 done out of 1,700.
Yeah. But I think if you look at
We'll call it 650.
other
Yeah.
Marky's end of the year post, it's actually like 90% of the top 100 or top 200 plugins.
Right.
So a lot of the plugins that haven't been done yet are ones that, are legacy, that are not used very often.
Right. So
Still appreciated being done, but not a higher priority.
Right. Okay. Cool. Oh, rats! I wasn't even sharing the screen. What was up with that? I thought I was doing it. So anyway, I pulled this up and I forgot what I was doing.
Yeah.
I'm assuming you probably saw it, but anyway, the people watching the stream didn't see it. So we went to jenkins-wiki-exporter.jenkins.io. I did a search, or I clicked on progress, which did a search for us, and then it came back with this set of results. It tells us, okay, if we get an okay, that means it's done.
Yeah.
Nothing to see here, move on.
It-
PR
it-
means somebody has done something.
Yes.
We're waiting. And then we'll go way, way down.
Yeah, since you're sorted by installs, just see.
Yeah.
It takes a long time to get to ones that are not
That are
migrated.
right. And then so the first one is down here at node label parameter. That one's to do.
Yeah, no one's done that yet. Ansible, no one's done yet. Kubernetes, a client API, no one's done yet. So there's lots of room for very meaningful contributions that don't involve Java. And I'm sure we can probably do another whole chat about that, contributions to Jenkins projects that don't involve Java. Because there's people like me who really want to be involved and really like the product, but don't know Java that well.
Absolutely. Okay. Now that I shared the screen right. Again, one more time, if you want to follow Gavin, Hawkeye,
Yes.
not Hawkeye.
I pronounce it Hawkeye, but yes,
You
it's
said-
spelled Hawkeye. And I think it's
Okay.
my Canadian accent that helps with that.
I believe you're right. Everything goes better with a Canadian accent and poutine, right?
Yeah. I've actually never had poutine, but I've been told it's really good. I can't have cheese, so I
Oh,
can't
that's
have
right.
poutine.
You could have fake poutine.
I can, but then you might as well not have poutine, right?
Hey, man, you can have gravy and fries,
Yes.
just no cheese.
Yeah.
But that's not poutine. Okay. Gavin, thanks for hanging out. I'm going to bump you out here and wrap up a couple things. Thanks again for hanging out with us tonight.
It was a lot of fun.
Or today, yeah, man. Thank you. And by the way, before you go away, I am trying my best. And of course, the holidays messed up everything. We're going to get Marky back on. And we're actually going to do, if you noticed when you signed up to watch this or you see the thumbnail for this episode, notice that it was labeled Jenkins Plugins, I believe, tutorial. I don't have it right here in front of me, something like that. We're going to start going through and talking with some of the plugin authors about how they maintain their plugins. And we're going to bring Marky on and we're going to talk about one of the plugins that he maintains. We'll probably get Mark on as well since he works on Git. People will probably want to understand how that is. So if you're a plugin author and you would like to be on this show, if you want to call it a show, in that series of episodes, let me know. There's mine. There's my Twitter handle right there. I am not in Gitter. I'm not active over on the Jenkins side like I should. Because due to the day job, I'm going to boot you out now, Gavin. But we'll talk again in a second. Don't leave me. Again, at Darren Pope, that is my Twitter handle, and you can find me at Darren Pope pretty much anywhere else. But I am a developer advocate for CloudBees, so you can also follow us there at CloudBees Devs. And thanks for hanging out with us today on this episode. If you liked it, give us a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and click on subscribe and ring that bell on CloudBees TV. And that's probably it. Let me see what here. Nigel, thank you for saying good talk. Because my tongue is getting tied right now. It's past my bedtime. It's time to go to sleep. So with that said, I am going to go ahead and wrap this up and get us ready to get out of here because it's end of the day, start of the day for some people. If you're watching this on replay, thanks for sticking up with all the silliness. Again, if you have questions, reach us on Twitter, however you want to do it, and we will talk to you again in the next video.